all these other videos come out, and it's like, well, this isn't a one-off. Like, there is a lot that seems to be coming out here about David Coote, and it's not now a case of can he referee in the Premier League again? It's can he referee again?
Where do you start with this? I suppose it was just an insane lack of judgment to allow yourself to be filmed in those circumstances. And I don't know, it just seems like a completely unnecessary distraction. We're talking about referees again. As much as we have to talk about referees, every referee will tell you we don't want to be talking about the referees. The referees don't want to be the centre of attention. But unfortunately, an incident like this, it's inevitable that we are going to be talking about it, and not least because it's an international break and it's basically filled the void for 2 weeks, unfortunately.
But let's be honest, if those videos hadn't come out, we'd probably still be talking about David Coote, in the sense that he's very, very lucky that Darwin Núñez scores off Salah getting fouled.
The VAR would have
the VAR would have intervened, but the fact that he was adamant it wasn't a foul, that was baffling in itself. And there have been a number of puzzling decisions from him over the years, whether it's VAR or as the referee when it's Liverpool games. But you don't think anything of it. He's just not the best referee in Europe and the country. It's no bad thing. You'll know how hard it is as a referee going up that pathway. There are going to be some that aren't as good as others. It's natural, same as it is for footballers. But then all this comes out, and there's not necessarily anything particularly wrong with what he says in the video. I'm going to finish that. That can't be taken out of context. That doesn't go anywhere else.
No.
Because he says Liverpool weren't very good. And we believe that video was on the day of the 7-2. 100% fair. They weren't very good the day of the 7-2 against Aston Villa.
Still very, very stupid to allow yourself to be filmed.
Stupid to allow yourself to be filmed. I'd imagine he doesn't remember being filmed for whatever reason. I'll let people speculate on that themselves. Then he insults Jurgen Klopp. And to an extent, that is understandable. Like, he's referenced the clashes he's had with Klopp the Burnley game, and if you're fourth official, and we know Klopp was like in your face of the officials. We've had ones against Tottenham where he's pulled his hamstring celebrating in the face of officials. If you're an official, you probably don't like Jurgen Klopp. Same as supporters, players, managers don't like referees. It works both ways. What the big issue with the video is, he brings Klopp's nationality into it, and then the guy alongside him obviously says some quite hard things about Scousers. And you put all that together, it's like, well, we can't just brush over this now. You've said one thing, so we're never going to have to go over it with a fine-tooth comb. And to be stupid enough to have it filmed, but then all these other videos come out, and it's like, well, this isn't a one-off. Like, there is a lot that seems to be coming out here about David Coote, and it's not now a case of can he referee in the Premier League again? It's can he referee again? Like, I did John Aldridge's column at the start of the week, and he was saying all referees should say who they support. That would help stop these issues, all the accusations of corruption. Because if you know David Coote supports Notts County, you're not going to be concerned about him being in charge of those sorts of games.
I think that was a plan already. I think for that to be published, it is obviously already known by the PGMOL, but I think that is going to be made known. But then
it's not a resolution.
It's a case of whether you believe that everyone in Manchester is an Altrincham fan or whatever.
That is something Aldo said himself, actually. But the knock-on from that is, it isn't just who you support, it's the rivals of you support. And then it's not the bitter local rivals or your title rivals, it's every knock-on effect. Like, say Nottingham Forest, for whatever reason, are in the top 4 at the end of the season, they suddenly become a rival, and every game means something. David Coote now, like Carragher said on the overlap this week, we can't referee Everton because he's been put himself in that position with that video where they're saying things about Scousers, and it's just a knock-on, it goes all the way. But then you see these other videos that I'm just going to allude to rather than directly say what they are. I'm sure if people care enough, they'll have seen them. That authority he's got, that respect he's got is gone. Like, a manager can say something about a referee and he'll get fined. He'll get suspended, whatever. He has authority of his team, but he doesn't have that authority in the match. The referee is supposed to be someone above that, and Coote has just blown that out of the water. I'm comparing it to, say, you're at school, a kid calls a teacher something, slap on the wrist, detention, suspension. A teacher calls a kid something, gets sacked. If you're in that position of power, you've got that authority. You cannot lose that position of authority, otherwise there is no way back. With David Coote here, there is no way back. Like, he's allowed himself to be filmed. He said these things. You could maybe brush over it if it wasn't this, then this, then this, then this. But now it's all added up, and I know you see it having an unhappy ending for him.
Yeah, I mean, the investigation into him is ongoing. We don't know what the outcome of that is going to be, but it's hard to look beyond that being the case, isn't it? I just think it's a bad look, really, for the whole of the Premier League referees. Whoever's refereeing Liverpool next, that's going to be a conversation. It's obviously not going to be David Coote, but I would imagine that they possibly will put one of the more experienced officials on that, just because the spotlight's going to be on there. If there's a big controversial decision, it's going to be talked about a lot. And I think as someone who referees, even just at a very low level compared to this, it just feels like it's another stick to beat referees with. It's another thing that's going to add to the conspiracy theories. We've seen, countless things on social media. There's kind of a feeling almost that automatically whatever the referee does these days is obviously wrong or is obviously corrupt in some way, which I think we've kind of got to such a level now where I'm not quite sure what the solution is, but this has just sort of blown it to another level and another proportion again, has made it a little bit more difficult for everybody across the board, really, when, as you say, you've got to have those elements of trust within officials. You've got to have that seems to have been eroded, and a video coming out where he does something that, to be honest, when I first viewed it, I just assumed that it was fake and it wasn't real. It just that was the automatic assumption. Well, of course that can't be the case. Nobody would be stupid enough to do that, but obviously one person does, and it opens then the question, rightly or wrongly, of whether there's other referees in that position or whether there's other people in similar positions. It just feels like it's going to be even more of a conversation now moving forwards, and we've kind of spiraled to a point where I'm not quite sure how we get out of it.
Well, it's opened up multiple conversations because it's firstly, has David Coote made poor decisions against Liverpool deliberately? Then it's opening up that wider, referees are human, they've got their feelings against players, managers. Does that influence it overall? Is there corruption? But then it also comes on to welfare as well, because David Coote, obviously, he's done things he shouldn't here. He's been filmed under the influence on some occasions. And it's like, well, why are you in that situation? Is this because you're struggling with the publicity, with the backlash? Is this how you cope? It just opens up something completely different there as well. And then it's, well, you need to support him. There needs to be better support in place for referees. Like, if something bad happens with a player, like we've seen it before, Luis Squires, for example, biting someone, Liverpool fan base still had his back. They still got that support there. Whereas the referee must be the loneliest job in football, because everyone is telling you you're wrong, and much worse phrases than that. They're on your back. And how do you get out of that? Like, if you've got that personal feeling because a manager's been in your face all day, to just switch that off, and then you ref them again, and you've got to switch it off still. They're only human. They're going to have those issues. Like, we know Klopp had those issues with them. Like, he had a couple of officials he'd always name as not being particularly fond of. Like, they're human. They're going to have those relationships, and they're not going to be positive. They are going to be negative. It's football. It's what happens. But yeah, there's going to have to be a complete overview here, looking at where they've gone wrong, where they've gone right, because we've been complaining about the level of officiating in English football for a long, long time now. They've got the technology coming in, and that seems to make it more complicated. They just need to find a way to get it right. But are we too far gone now? Is there just no way? Like, is the only solution going full AI, because then they don't have emotions? Yeah, there's always going to be something to complain about.
I think that the VAR point is an important one, isn't it? Because that does seem to have made it worse. There was, for whatever reason, an assumption that was a machine that would come in and just fix everything, which clearly was never going to be the case. It's probably put more scrutiny on referees in certain points. I've seen, people complaining and sort of discussing the mic'd up thing that Howard Webb does with Michael Owen, or Leon Osman as it was on the latest one. Things like that automatically, I think, are assumed to be a negative thing or a bad thing. And I know Howard Webb obviously had to kind of brush over to a certain extent what had happened with the David Coote stuff, because it was, a program that came out pretty much as soon as that.
As it was happening, isn't it?
But, at the same time, I think it's not a bad idea to try and be more transparent, or to try and explain why these things are happening. If they don't do it, they get criticised because they're hiding something and they're not letting people see the audio and seeing the process. If they do it, people then are not happy with the process, or say, well, we know you've made a mistake because we've seen it already. You almost can't win in that scenario. It just seems like I'm not quite sure, I suppose, how you fix that. And that's more what I'm bothered about, really. Obviously, the Coote story is big. Refereeing generally is often a story, much more often than what we would want it to be, but I'm more interested in the fix and the solution. And to be honest, I've got no idea what that looks like.
No, it's a massive dilemma now, and they've got to start first with David Coote, resolve that, do the investigations, see what's happened, what needs to happen, and then you take it wider. Like, we're still waiting, what is it, for the semi-AI offsides to come in. That changes things. You look at VAR, and it seems to vary week on week. Like, we can see Jota get taken out. He's not last man, but then Saliba is in an Arsenal-Bournemouth game. There's just no consistency there in the officiating, and there's so many issues here. And the fact that it is a story, it's just hard to stomach. You don't want it to be the deciding factor in matches. You don't want to know the referees' names. You don't want them to be having big decisive stay on matches. You want the players to be doing it. And the fact that it is coming out here, it's not even a blessing, is it? But the fact that all this big headlines from David Coote is his behaviour off the pitch rather than on it, as long as what he's done off the pitch proves to not have impacted what's happened on the pitch. He hasn't let it influence his decisions or anything. And there's no suggesting he has at this point. But then we'll see what comes from these.
Certainly not consciously, but potentially there's then the question, which you can never prove one way or the other, of unconsciously is there something, or whatever it might be. There's always going to be those questions, and again, there's always been those questions about what if a referee supports a team who's involved in a relegation battle or a title race, indirectly does something. I think there was one at the back end of last season. I think I'm right in saying that Jared Gillett isn't allowed to do Liverpool games because I think he was potentially a Liverpool fan when he was younger, but then he's allowed to do Arsenal matches or things like that. So it's all a little bit tricky.